I read the text twice, not because I misunderstood it, but because some part of me genuinely believed I had missed something, a word, a tone, anything that would make it make sense. It was a text from my mother. 7 words. We're moving forward. Don't interfere with this. No context. No explanation. No call beforehand. Just 7 words dropped into my phone at 11:43 on a Tuesday night, like she was canceling a lunch reservation and not 8 years of trust. I set the phone down on my kitchen counter and stood there in the dark for a long time. What time is it where you are right now? I'm genuinely curious, because I think the people who find these stories always find them at a particular kind of hour. The quiet ones. The ones where you're supposed to be sleeping, but instead you're lying there, replaying conversations, wondering when exactly things shifted and how you didn't notice sooner. That night I noticed, and by the following morning, there were 41 missed calls on my phone, a voicemail from my father that started with the words, "We made a mistake," and a text from my brother that I have still, to this day, never responded to. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name does not matter for this story. What matters is what I was, functionally, inside my family's financial life for the better part of a decade. I was the one who showed up. I was the one who answered. I was the one who, at 23 years old, sat across from a loan officer, with my own credit, and co-signed a refinance on my parents' house in Phoenix, because they were 60 days from losing it, and my older brother, Marcus, was living in Nashville, doing what Marcus had always done, which was exactly whatever was convenient for Marcus. I did not resent that at the time. I want to be honest about that. I was not a martyr about it. I co-signed because I loved them, and because I was capable, and because it felt like the right thing to do. My parents had worked hard their whole lives and hit a bad stretch, and I had good credit and a steady income, and it seemed simple. What I did not fully understand then, what took me years to learn, was that when you become the person who solves problems, some families stop seeing you as a person and start seeing you as a resource. And resources do not have feelings that need to be considered. Resources are just there, and then they are used. It started slowly, the way these things always do. My parents began calling me first for everything. Not just financial things, everything. The car needed a repair, and they'd call me before they'd even looked up a mechanic. My mother wanted to move her doctor's appointment, and somehow that required my input. I was the first call, the backup call, the follow-up call, and eventually the person they called when the other calls hadn't worked out. I managed their insurance paperwork. I helped them file taxes 2 years running. I flew home to Phoenix 3 times in 18 months for things that, looking back, did not strictly require my physical presence. I was not asked if any of this was okay. And then Marcus came home. He came back about 14 months before any of this happened. Said he was done with the music industry, done with Nashville, ready to settle down and be closer to family. My parents were overjoyed. I was happy for them. I remember calling my mother the night he arrived and listening to her cry a little the good kind of tears and feeling genuinely warm about it. What I noticed over the following weeks was small at first. My mother would mention something Marcus had said. My father would reference a conversation they'd had over dinner, a dinner I hadn't been invited to, not because of hostility, but just because I lived 40 minutes away and Marcus was right there, sleeping in his old room. I told myself it was normal. He was catching up. They were reconnecting. That was healthy. Then the calls to me got shorter. The requests slowed down. And when my parents started talking about the house, the plan they'd apparently been building together, the plan that would change everything, they had already been talking about it for weeks before anyone said a word to me. The plan was this. My parents wanted to sell the Phoenix house, pull together what equity they'd built, equity that existed, at least in part, because of the refinance I had co-signed and purchase a property jointly with Marcus, a house in Scottsdale, big enough for my parents to have their own section, close enough to everything, a fresh start. Marcus would co-own, Marcus would be on the deed. Marcus would, in their words, finally settle down and put down roots. I found out about this plan on a Sunday afternoon when my mother called to ask if I could come over for dinner. She said there was something they wanted to discuss. I drove to Phoenix thinking maybe it was a medical thing, or a legal question, or something involving the car. I brought a lasagna because my mother had mentioned earlier in the week that she hadn't been cooking much. They told me the plan over dinner. They were excited. Marcus was grinning across the table at me. And then, almost as a footnote, my father mentioned that they were going to need to close out the joint account, the account I had set up with my mother 4 years earlier, to help manage their monthly bills and transfer the funds as part of the down payment. The joint account that had approximately $11,000 in it. Several thousand of which I had deposited myself over the years, not as loans, because I had never thought of them as loans, but as help, as family. I asked, gently, whether they had thought about the refinance, whether my name was going to remain on the old loan through the sale process, whether anyone had spoken to an attorney. My father said Marcus had a guy. I asked what guy. Marcus said a friend of his from Nashville who had since moved to Scottsdale and worked in real estate. Licensed, he said. Totally solid. I asked if I could see anything in writing. The mood shifted. Not dramatically. Not in a way you could point to. But it shifted the way a room shifts when someone walks in who wasn't expected. My mother picked up her glass. My father looked at Marcus. And Marcus looked at me with an expression I recognized from childhood, the one that meant he was about to say something reasonable sounding that was not actually reasonable. He said he thought it was interesting that my first instinct was to ask for paperwork instead of just being happy for the family. I drove home with the lasagna pan empty in my back seat, and a feeling in my chest I couldn't quite name. Over the next 3 weeks, I asked 4 more times to see the purchase agreement. I asked to speak with the real estate contact. I asked whether my name had been addressed in the title process. I asked if anyone had checked whether the existing refinance would complicate the sale timeline. Each time, I was told it was being handled. Each time, the conversation moved away from specifics and toward the general idea that I was creating stress around something that should be joyful. Marcus said, on a call with both my parents present, that he felt like I was trying to control the situation. My mother said she just wanted the family to feel united. My father said almost nothing, which was, I had learned, its own kind of statement. The last time I asked, my mother sent me the text. We're moving forward. Don't interfere with this. I stood in my kitchen for a long time, and then I sat down, opened my laptop, and called my own attorney. Her name is not important, but I will tell you that I had her on retainer since the original refinance. My financial advisor had insisted on it at the time, and I had rolled my eyes but done it anyway. I bless that financial advisor regularly. We spoke for 40 minutes that night. She told me what I had begun to suspect, that my name was still tied to the existing mortgage until it was formally released through the sale, that I had legal standing to request documentation, and that the joint account had nuances worth addressing before any transfer was made. She also told me something I had not considered, which was that, if the sale closed and the new purchase proceeded without my name being formally released and the joint account properly dissolved, I could find myself carrying liability for a property I would have no rights to. I thanked her. I hung up. I went to bed. I did not call my parents. I did not text Marcus. I did not say a single word to any of them. But in the morning, I called my bank. I will not go through every step of what happened over the next 11 days, because some of it involves specifics my attorney has asked me to keep general. What I will say is this: there are things you can do, legally and quietly, when your name is attached to a financial instrument and you are not being included in decisions about that instrument. There are notifications you can file. There are holds you can place. There are letters your attorney can send that require a response within a specific window of time. None of it is dramatic. All of it is extremely effective. I went to work. I cooked dinner. I called a friend and talked about something unrelated for an hour. I slept better than I had in 3 weeks. On the 11th day, my mother called. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. I let it go. My father called. Then Marcus called, which surprised me, because Marcus does not typically involve himself in tasks that do not benefit Marcus. I let all of it go. By the end of the evening there were 41 missed calls across 3 people, and a voicemail from my father that began, "We made a mistake, please call us back. There are some complications with the sale, and we need to talk to you." Complications. That was the word he used. I listened to the voicemail twice, not because I had missed anything, but because I wanted to hear his voice clearly and understand whether what I was hearing was genuine. I called back the next morning. 8 a.m. I am a morning person. My father answered on the first ring. The complications, as it turned out, were significant. The title process had surfaced the existing refinance and my co-signed status on the loan, and the buyer's financing had complications of its own, and the whole timeline was now under pressure in ways that apparently Marcus's real estate friend had not anticipated. They needed my written cooperation to proceed with the sale in the window they had agreed to. My father asked if I could just sign off on things quickly so they could move forward. I told him I would be happy to cooperate fully with whatever the legal process required. I told him my attorney would be the point of contact, and that all documentation should go through her office. I told him that once I had reviewed everything and was satisfied that my name was being properly handled, I would act quickly. He asked why I needed an attorney involved. I told him that I had always had an attorney involved. Since the refinance, that had not changed. There was a long silence. Then he said, quietly, "Your brother thought you would just let this go." I did not respond to that immediately. I let it sit in the air. Then I said, "I know." That was all. I know. 2 words. Because I did know. I had known for weeks. The entire plan had depended on me being the version of myself I had been for years, the one who absorbs, who adjusts, who makes things easier for everyone else at a cost that no one tallies, because I have never once handed anyone a bill. The thing about being the reliable one, the capable one, the one who always shows up is that eventually some people stop registering that your reliability is a choice. They start treating it like weather, like gravity, like something that simply exists and requires no maintenance. Marcus believed I would let it go, because Marcus had watched me let things go for a decade. He had watched me co-sign and manage and fly home and fill out paperwork and deposit money into accounts and ask for nothing in return. And he had concluded, reasonably from his vantage point, that this was simply my nature. That I had no edges. He was wrong. I had just never had sufficient reason to show them. The sale was delayed by 6 weeks. The Scottsdale deal, as originally structured, fell through the window they had needed closed before everything could be renegotiated, and the seller was not willing to extend. Marcus's real estate contact, as far as I understand, was not particularly useful in managing that process. My parents ultimately did sell the Phoenix house, but on a later timeline and under different terms. My name was formally released. The joint account was dissolved correctly, and after a frank conversation with my attorney about what was mine versus what had been shared, a number was arrived at. A modest one, but a real one. Marcus moved back to Nashville within 2 months. I want to be careful here about what I say next, because this is the part that I think is easy to get wrong. I did not feel triumphant about any of this. I want to be honest with you about that. There was no moment where I laughed or felt vindicated or checked something off a list. What I felt was something quieter than that, something closer to settled. Because the thing I had spent years afraid to examine, the question of what would happen if I stopped being endlessly accommodating, had finally been answered, and the answer was, I would be fine. Better than fine. The world did not end. My parents were frustrated with me for a period, and then were not. My father eventually said something approximating, an acknowledgement that they had not handled it well. My mother and I have a different relationship now, more honest and, I think, more equal. Marcus and I do not speak, which is not something I pursued, and not something I grieve. What I kept, through all of it, was my name, my credit, my money, my standing. The things that had been quietly at risk because someone had decided that the most reliable person in the room could be moved around like furniture. You are not furniture. That is, I think, the whole point. If someone in your life has been treating your presence like a given, your resources like a shared pool they didn't contribute to, and your boundaries like obstacles to be routed around, I want you to hear this clearly. The moment you stop performing accessibility, things will get loud, they will call. They will use words like family and unity, and why are you doing this to us? They will be confused, genuinely, Because you have never shown them this version of yourself. Show them anyway. The 41 calls were not an emergency. They were a recalibration. They were the sound of people realizing, for the first time, what it would actually cost to move forward without you. Answer when you're ready, on your terms, through your attorney if necessary. And if someone asks why you suddenly need everything in writing, you tell them the same thing I told my father. You say, I know. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you've been the reliable one, in a situation that didn't reward your reliability, drop a comment. I read every single one. I'll see you in the next one.